Include the computer sound. Share screen.
It's that thrill of a new opportunity, of shared connection, of wrapping your head around how it all works. It's closing the pitch on a game-changing idea, the late nights spent with your teammates, and how industry shapes the world with each disruption, innovation, twist and turn. When we talk about business, it's more than just outdated corporate notions. It goes beyond water cooler conversations, 9 to 5s or profit and loss. It's fighting for the social and environmental impact of commercial decisions. It's learning the right questions to ask. It's finding the glass ceiling and breaking through. When we say business, we mean new models of enriched economies at local and global scale. We mean what's next for future skills, technology and beyond. When we say business, we mean it.
It's 11. Shall we wait for a while or we want to make a start? Have we got the speaker from Department of Transport, Jason?
Hi there, I'm here.
Oh, hi, Jason. Okay, so in that case, I think we'll make a start. All right, let me share screen. Are you guys able to see the presentation slide?
Yes.
All right. Okay, hello everyone. My name is Yiling. I'm the senior lecturer at the Department of Information Systems and Business Analytics. I'm also the MC and the moderator for today's webinar, focusing on open data and smart mobility. So besides my department, the webinar is also co-hosted by Global Transport and Logistics Research Group in my school, and Entity Data and Institute of Transportation's Engineer, ITE. So welcome to the third of the mobility webinar series. Before we move on, please note a few housekeeping items. First, the entire session is recorded and the recording will be made available to you in due course. Second, please mute your mic and also turn off the camera if you are not speaking. If you have any burning questions, please type them in the chat. We'll have the panel discussions after all the speakers have presented. Without further ado, I'll pass the baton to Professor David Smith, the Dean of School of Accounting, Information Systems and Supply Chain. He will be acknowledging the country and giving a welcome speech. Over to you, David.
Thanks, Yiling, and thank you all for being with us today. I'm David Smith, Dean of the School of Accounting, Information Systems and Supply Chain here at RMIT University. And on behalf of the school, I'm delighted to be welcoming you all to this session. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands on which we are meeting today. I'd like to acknowledge the people of the Woiwurrung and Boonwurrung language groups of the Eastern Kulin Nation, on whose unceded lands we conduct the business of the university. I respectfully acknowledge their ancestors and elders, past and present. I would also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians and their ancestors of the lands and waters across Australia where we conduct our business. As I said, I'm delighted to have the privilege to welcome you all to this panel discussion, our third in a series, today looking at open data and smart mobility. We've been very fortunate to have had wonderful speakers and fantastic audience participation at our webinars on mobility this year, and today's event will be no exception. The event is hosted by our school's Department of Information Systems and Business Analytics and the Global Transport and Logistics Research Group in collaboration with NTT Data and the Institute of Transportation Engineers. I would like to thank our moderator and the organising committee for today's event, so to Yiling Bu, who you've already met, and to Arthur Adamopoulos, Mohammed Hussain, Sayen Teo, Victor Gukara, who are all members of our school. Thank you. And thanks also to a former member of our school, Sachi Lakuj, who is now at the University of Southern Queensland. It's my great pleasure to also be able to introduce our three esteemed panellists for this morning's panel presentation. Andrew Hartnett, Business Development Strategic Advisor from NTT Data, Jason Bradley, the Director of Innovation from the Department of Transport, Victoria, and Maisie Raba, a postdoctoral research fellow from the University of Queensland. Thank you to all three of our panellists for taking the time to be with us here today, and we look forward to your insights. Again, on behalf of the School of Accounting, Information Systems and Supply Chain, welcome, and I hope you find today's session valuable and rewarding. I'll now hand over to Dr. Mohammed Hussain for his opening presentation. Thank you, Mohammed.
Thank you, David. Good morning, everyone. Let's start with a true story. Yiling, next slide, please. In 2017 Boxing Day, this beautiful family from New South Wales was hit and killed by a 51-year-old driver. His name was Craig, and who killed himself as well. Craig, he had a very terrible driving record, who got learner's license at his age of 50, but he was driving car for 34 years. And moreover, he had been on a prescription drug since 1990 and had been refused customer service from several pharmacies for being aggressive, demanding, and intimidating. On the day of this tragic incident, Craig was given 4 diazepam tablets by a hospital, and which a doctor specifically told him not to take more than 1 tablet at one time. But apparently he did not listen. Could this incident be avoided? I'll come back to this later, I promise. Next slide, please. So now let's find a very brief definition of open data and smart mobility. Open data are non-sensitive data that are machine readable and freely available to everyone to use, reuse, and republish. A vast amount of this data is generated during normal service delivery and as well as from digital technologies such as social media, mobile and smart gadgets, Bluetooth sensors, and IoT. Next slide, please. Smart mobility is an intelligent transport and mobility network system. It contains a wide range of modes of transportation, including our traditional and autonomous vehicle, on-demand car, bike, and scooter ride-sharing services, and augmented traffic realities. In short, we can say smart mobility enables zero emissions, zero accidents, and zero ownership. Next slide, please. As my friends and my colleagues know, I'm a very nervous person. Every time I'm to catch a train to RMIT, I'm afraid of missing it. If I'm on time, the train is late, and ironically, the train comes on time if I'm late. Next slide, please. The train location in real time, sorry, the previous one, Yiling. The train location in real time can be shared with the vehicles and with the citizens by V2V and V2I, vehicle to infrastructure, and vice versa. And for example, if the train's position could be shared with me in real time, and that could restrict me from running fanatically and save my shoes, and thus providing better mobility in terms of safety, as I do not need to check and refresh the PTV app while I'm driving. So next slide, please. And smart mobility also can help the drivers searching for parking places based on open data, including the geographical proximity and the data of a particular vehicle, such as the disabled permission, the size of the car, priority citizenship, local resident, taxi, And then, of course, they can pay the parking fee automatically. Next slide, please. Smart mobility using open data is not a futuristic concept, and it is already happening. For example, in New York, they installed sensors, cameras, RFID readers in the road intersections. The combined data is transmitted wirelessly to the city's traffic management center, allowing their engineers to remotely adjust traffic signal patterns in real time to clear traffic jams. Also, the real-time traffic flow information is made available to normal citizens and the motorists. The next slide, please, Yiling. In the US, Jersey City and the town of Cary, they published their bike-related data to offering, COVID-free outing. And more similar applications are observed in Australia, in Paris and Rennes, in France, in Spain, in Tennessee and Kentucky in the USA, to list a few. Next slide, please. So it is expected that in the near future, all vehicles, they will be continuously interconnected during their journey. And those vehicles, they will be continuously receiving and possibly they will be sharing data and information to and from other transports and vehicles in various aspects, including problems in the roads, congestions, and if any driver is having nasty driving and so on. So if we go back to the tragic incident, the hospital, the police, the pharmacy, the licensing authority, they had the record of the driver, Craig, but those data and information they did not share with anyone before the incident has taken place. This family, it could have avoided this incident if they were warned about the position of the Craig's car. So this is nothing extra but the smart mobility through open data. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our panel discussion on open data in smart mobility. And Andrew, Jason, Macy, the experts on this topic, they will provide us the wealth of information today. And I can't wait to see their presentations. Thank you so much for listening to me.
Thank you, Mohammed. I can't wait to move on to the next agenda as well, the individual presentations by our invited speakers and also the panel discussion. So we've got the first speakers, which is from our co-host, NTT Data. So Andrew Harnett, who is the Business Development Strategic Advisor at NTT Data, his role spans the NTT business globally, allowing him to share his extensive knowledge and experience capturing, storing, securing, and using data to deliver an agency's mission, keeping the customer's journey at the center of NTT transportation story. Andrew strives to deliver more personalized and protected experiences for all network passengers. By providing thought leadership and engagement in emerging global trends and technologies, Andrew demonstrates his strong ability to inspire teams, drive work, deliver innovations, and achieve results. I'll now pass the baton to Andrew.
Thank you very much, Yiling, and thank you for that very kind bio that I'll need to get a copy of one day to learn those great things. But and I want to say thank you very much to RMIT for hosting the session today. I'm also very much looking forward to hearing from the other speakers and the panel discussion. So I wanted to start quite quickly just to give a quick introduction to NTT. We are not that well known in Australia, but we hope to be changing that as we go forward. But at a very quick glance, NTT Data is part of the NTT Group. We're a Japanese-based company. Our history is as a telco with over 150 years of telecommunication history behind us. But we have expanded quite a lot outside of Japan and have a range of capabilities across 87 countries. So NTT Data is one of the operating companies. within that NTT group, and we are all able to work together and to pool those capabilities from across all of the different parts of NTT groups. So open data, easy, right? Just put some data out there and let people use it however they want to use it. But there's a number of elements to open data, and I wanted to talk through a couple of those this morning, and then look at one possible way that we can start to provide that open data a bit easier, because NTT very much believes that making data available and using data for a range of needs and range of outcomes is absolutely essential to the future of smart mobility and smart cities and so on. So not locking that data into any proprietary system, but making that data open, but also making that data usable. So I just wanted to talk through a little bit about that first. Understandable. I'm not sure how many people on the call today are from the transport world, but the transport world tends to have a language of its own. There's more acronyms than I can believe. And I've actually been in conversations where I'm not sure a word of it's been in English, but we've all understood exactly what we're all talking about in the transport space. So the first thing we need to do if we want to start making this data more open to customers and new partners to leverage that data is to make sure that that data is understandable. It's in a language and uses forms that is usable for everyone. But it's also in structure that is understandable, not system-generated table names and so on. We need to really think through what is the data structure that we are going to expose through this open data format. Then we have to make sure that that data is accessible. So how are we going to present that data? Is it going to be through APIs? Is it going to be through downloads? How are we going to make that data accessible, but also findable? How are we going to make sure that users are able to know that that data is there initially, and then once they get into that data, they are able to find what they want to do with that data. So they're able to find the data that they need. So it's not just a case of putting that data on a server somewhere and assuming it's there. It's really making sure that that data is accessible, findable, and usable for customers. And then the last one, which I think is really important, is trustworthy. It can be detrimental to all parties in the transport ecosystem if the data we expose through open data platforms is not accurate, is not trustworthy, and is not stable. So if we're asking people to develop new apps or new innovations off that data or use that data in some form, we can't just decide to drop that data the next day. We can't decide to change the format. We have to provide a stable, trustworthy set of data that allows people to use that data in a whole range of new ways. And if we get to that point, we really start to have the platform that enables that open data for smart mobility. But how do we get the data into that platform? I'm fortunate enough to spend time with all kinds of customers and innovators around the world that are doing, frankly, amazing things at the edge. So the range of sensors that are available now that can be put in the transport system, the buses and vehicles themselves and trains themselves, the amount of data that can come from those vehicles, the amount of data that can come from all of these sensors is just unbelievable. But have we got the right structure in place to support that? I'll show you my next slide. It is a representation of a bus, but could easily be a train or a tram or any other vehicle as well. So here we have a poor bus trying to get on with its life, and it's laden down with all of these different sensors. So we're starting to see agencies install LiDAR cameras on their buses to start to understand the road conditions and the curbside conditions around their cities. Passenger counters to start to understand who's actually getting on and off the bus compared to the ticketing data. Headway management, starting to provide data to the driver about whether they need to speed up, slow down, keep a distance from the bus in front or vehicle in front, and so on. Of course, there's ticketing data around allowing people to pay for their travel. Cameras are becoming more and more prevalent in all parts of our lives, but especially in transportation. a whole range of IoT sensors, and of course, as I mentioned as well, the bus system itself. And one of the real challenges in this space is each of the innovators that are bringing these new sensors to market has to have not just their edge device, but then of course a networking solution to allow them to communicate to a whole differentiated back office. And then they have an analytics tool attached to that back office that allows them to produce data. But there are, as you can see here, a range of these different sensors and providers on the bus, and each of them have to install this networking equipment, this back office. They have to certify it all as secure, as private, as encrypted, to make sure that that data is being managed correctly. And that really can constrain the innovation at the edge, but we can also lead to having multiple different data sets that is then very hard for people that use that data in an open data platform to get any genuine insights out of and to manage that data going forward. So it really is a challenge. And I saw when I was preparing for this talk the other day a tweet that really summed it up quite well for me. And I just put it there. So can you quickly just pull this data for me? Sure, let me select everything from some pristine data set that you think I've got. And I think that's a really true statement in a lot of transportation ecosystems at the moment. Is there are huge amounts of data, but they're all in very individual silos or all very specific, and they tell a chapter of a story, but they don't tell the whole story. And so if we want to get to that open data outcome and really enable innovation at the edge, but also innovation with that data, we think that there's a way that we should be starting to look and think about what is the infrastructure that we can put in place that really fosters and enables that, and also gives the security to agencies that we are controlling the data, we are removing that risk of that data being compromised as early as possible in its life. So if we have a look at the data infrastructure of the future, we contemplate looking at some form of edge compute solution that can sit on the bus, sit at the train station, something like that, and act as a two-way conduit between all of these fantastic innovations at the edge. So can the edge compute solution do all the work to make sure that that data is secure and encrypted to a standard that the agency wants to enforce before controlling its delivery to a central back office in the data accumulation, so that we're getting that data in a common format and can get it out to that open data platform and to our customers as fast as possible. This also removes that investment requirement for these edge providers to have to invest in a networking solution, a data protection solution, or the audits and certifications that come with that. They can instead leverage that edge compute solution that sits there for all users for that task. It also allows the edge providers to contemplate using common data from that edge compute. Do we really need to all have our own GPS systems for all these systems, or can we use a common GPS signal for all of them? So looking to provide that edge solution, an edge compute solution, has a range of advantages for innovation at the edge, but also getting that data as early as possible into a secure common format that then can move back to that data accumulator, which again brings that data together with other data sets and makes it available through that open data platform we all want to achieve. So as I said, enables disruption at the edge, gets data into a common format. This is a really important point, is it gets complete data to customers fast. So there's no point in telling a customer one small piece of the story on their mobility journey if they can't see the full picture. So how it really starts to enable this digital infrastructure, starts to allow customers to see the complete story and allow them to make those holistic decisions as they move forward. It also means we're all singing from the same song sheet. So we're ensuring that by having a single data accumulation, we're producing data that goes to open data, we're producing data that goes to our customer service touchpoints, to our digital channels, and to our operation centers. That's all the same. So customers aren't getting different information from different places, and everyone is getting that same rich information that they can make decisions from. And once we get to that point where we have data coming very quickly and very securely from the edge into that data accumulation, and we're providing that open data, you're thinking of those three principles of trustworthiness, accuracy, and accessibility. It really means we can now start to think about what are some of the use cases that we can apply to it. So if we have a look at some of the areas that NTT's thinking about and really becomes enabled once we get to this open data platform, is enhanced safety and security. How can we bring together camera data from the solution with different IoT sensors and different information about people's movements to try and enhance the security and safety that are on our transport network? How can we do better at intelligent operations and maintenance? How can, again, we use ticketing data or use passenger counter data to better understand the effect of usage and passengers and journeys on all the different components of our transport ecosystem, both on the road surface, curbside, the vehicles themselves, and equipment installed on those vehicles, and therefore start to be better at maintenance and make sure that we are always working to improve the efficiency and trustworthiness of our transport system. How can we start to deliver those improved customer experiences through personalized and contextualized services? So really bringing that data together and understanding the journey that that customer wants to take and making sure that we can support them both during good times, but also when there's disruptions. How can we understand enough about that customer's journey that we can personalize their disruption management solution rather than just telling everyone, wait for the bus and we'll try and help you as best we can. We can actually personalize that outcome. Of course, as we start to move towards autonomous vehicles, how can we start to enhance the usability of those through bringing together data from across the transport ecosystem? Intelligent routing and multimodal transit also relies on it. So there's a range of different outcomes that all become possible when we get to the open data. But I would say, and I've been lucky enough to be involved with a range of graduate programs and speaking to the people of RMIT, the best thing about an open data platform is I don't have to know what the use case is going to be. Once you make that data available, the outcomes that you get to see and the use cases you get to experience are just unbelievable. And you really unlock the capability of that data by setting it free in that structured, controlled way that obviously manages risks of privacy and security and so on. So just to finish off, I wanted to talk about a couple of places that we are using the data in different ways. So in the city of Las Vegas, we have our global smart platform deployed, and we are using it for a range of use cases that, again, pull that data from all kinds of sources. So crowd counting and occupancy solutions, health checks via thermal sensing. We're able to detect all kinds of movements of people around the transport network, so climbing over fences, getting onto train tracks, getting into locations they shouldn't be. We're able to detect that through our systems and provide notifications. We're also able to count vehicles and traffic congestions and patterns, and if there's a accident where people go. Wrong way driving is also a big problem in Las Vegas. So there's a whole range of use cases we're able to use because that data is there and open. The next one is around, sorry, I'm not sure. UC Berkeley, they had a big problem with traffic movement through their campus. So again, we were able to use a bunch of sensors in the vehicles and on cameras and so on to do a whole range of pattern matching and leverage that data to provide them much more insights into how people are driving around their campus, where they're stopping, what effects different stopping behaviours have on the traffic flow in their campus, and pass that data through. So a wide range of outcomes there. And the last one I'll just touch on quickly as well is NTT is the named sponsor of the IndyCar series in North America, and we do a whole range of use cases using the data that comes off the vehicles, but also around the crowds as well. So predicting how crowds will move into the stadiums, when they are most likely and where they're most likely to get beverages and food during the event, but also, of course, everything to do with the cars themselves, and pulling data from the suits that the drivers wear, from the cars, from the tracks, and a range of data points to really provide a really rich experience. So I just wanted to give those three examples there of things that may not have been possible if we hadn't had partners in the transport space that really wanted to embrace that open data platform. So I think I'm out of time now, so I'll stop going on, but and hand back to you, Ling. But thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Andrew. Moving on, our second speaker, Jason Bradley, Director of Innovations from the Department of Transport in Victoria. Well, he has kindly stepped in for his colleague who unfortunately couldn't make it today. Jason is an executive with a proud record of public service in the Victorian transport sector. He has led teams across innovations, corporate strategy and governance, audit and risk, executive, non-executive, and ministerial services and public relations. Most recently, as Director of Innovation, Jason has led the establishment of Transport X, a dedicated innovation and reform program of transport. Jason, much appreciated. The floor is yours.
Thanks heaps for having me, everyone. So as mentioned, I'm Jason Bradley, Director Innovation at the Department of Transport here in Victoria. I've just got a slide deck I'll just bring up. Just one second. So I'm keen to brief RMIT on a bit of the journey that DOT has been on over the past couple of years and where we're headed within an open data setting. Let's move on to the next slide. So a couple of years ago, our ministers and the secretary decided to commence an innovation and reform program. And as part of the program, we were kind of challenged with, rethinking where the department's approach hadn't worked in the past and potentially had led to suboptimal outcomes for customers. We were quite keen to use an innovation and iterative testing process to trial new solutions before making recommendations to government on expanding to statewide solutions. And then pretty importantly for us as well within DOT is developing new ways of working internally that support teams within agile contexts, as well as partnering, more truly partnering with the ecosystem and suppliers to achieve outcomes for Victorians. So about maybe 18 months ago now, as part of COVID, government's COVID response, we kind of really got our kickstart as a program. We ended up going to industry with a challenge to help us restore confidence in the public transport network as part of our kind of COVID recovery in Victoria. We were fortunate to have suppliers like NTT Data respond to that challenge. And then at the beginning of the year, the department released real-time crowding information, real-time GPS location arrival information for the metropolitan train network. So RideSpace is the department's tool, temporary tool, which kind of has a COVID banner attached to it. It provides real-time crowding information, as I mentioned, for the metropolitan train network. But the real value in RideSpace is actually providing that data. So earlier in the year, with the help of NTT, we've provided our real-time crowding data, GPS location, and arrival information for metro trains through to Google. So this, I'll see if I can play the video, just one sec. Nope, it's not going to play. So I encourage you to have a look when you get a chance. But within the Google environment now, if you plan your metropolitan train trip you will see our real-time train information. So this is really significant for DOT, because for like a really long time, we've had a lot of that real-time information on our public transport network locked into the PTV app. And that's because of data standards and data formats. So up until recently, the department used internal data formats that weren't accepted by industry, GTFSR. So we've now translated into GTFSR, and that data is flowing through to Google. But I guess it doesn't really stop there for us, because we don't want to create another hack. So I live in the city. I've got hacks around, I like Tram Tracker because it gives me real-time tram information. I like the PTV app because it gives me real-time information across the PT network, but we don't yet have that available in more apps. So we're working on that right now. So I'll go to the next slide. So as part of our real-time journey for the public transport network, as I mentioned a bit earlier in the year, we released our metro trains real-time crowding and arrival departure information through to the state's crowding tool, RideSpace. And we also launched that data through to Google, which was pretty significant. Melbourne became the 5th city in the world through Google to have real-time crowding information provided by the state. So that's pretty significant for us. We got a bit of a win. We got pipped by Sydney, but we're still top 5. In April as well, we commenced a series of pilots for Metropolitan Bus real-time and crowding out to the open data community, and we've got pilots that have been in play for some time on 80 buses across the Metropolitan train network. We also recognised the state's core capability in providing its own crowding information. So we've switched over from NTT's support and help through to an internal crowding algorithm, which now provides crowding information out to RideSpace and Google, and shortly more. So that crowding algorithm is based on the state's ticketing data and gets enhanced with predictive learning, historical trends, major events, and the like, as well as our weight sensor data that is on large parts of the Metropolitan train network, and then is provided through to customers. We are getting ready to press go on the release of our real-time metro train information to more channels like Apple Maps and Placey and Arivo. So as customers on the network, you'll be able to see that data really soon within the app of your choice. And we're also working on a series of other pilots to understand more parts of the network from a real-time crowding and real-time arrival GPS location perspective. So we've got pilots underway for the V-Line network, and we'll be looking to release our Metropolitan Bus real-time and the crowding info that we have through to open data channels pretty soon in January as well. In parallel, we're about to kick off Yarra Tram's real-time arrival pilots, with the ultimate aim of much of this work is making this data and information available for the open data community. So as transport users, you'll be able to access a lot of this information within the channel of your choice pretty soon. I kind of wanted to call out a couple of other, I guess, use cases without, in particular, our real-time crowding data, because when we commenced this work, we had very much a kind of COVID recovery lens on. So, you know, giving customers confidence and catching the train by letting them know how busy it is. But we've actually had quite a lot of customer sentiment and research come back to us that's told us different things and more use cases that we didn't fully appreciate or anticipate when we started. So some of those use cases with real-time crowding information is we've had reports from Victoria Police, particularly around women's safety, that female customers using the public transport network are checking our crowding data to feel safe, making sure that they're selecting routes when it's busy. We've also had reports come through from our customer sentiment research with from customers with accessibility needs. They're checking our crowding data to see when there's space for their wheelchair or their accessibility needs on the train. They're pretty powerful user stories around, you know, the interest in that crowding information. And even from an open data perspective, we've got a lot of buzz from JC Decau and New Media around our crowding information, because they're quite keen to understand how busy our train stations are to look at their pricing structures for advertising on the network. We also have the likes of Uber and Lyft pretty pumped for our real-time crowding information, because they'd love to be able to send busy cars to busy stations. So we're just starting to scratch the surface with understanding the full value of our real-time information. I'm also pretty, I guess, happy to let you know as well, we're getting underway really soon with our Pathways data collection for 46 complex train stations across Victoria. So this is pretty exciting when paired with our real-time arrival information for the Metro train network. So this Pathways data set will tell customers how to navigate from the front door of a train station, up a ramp potentially to the ticket booth, through to platform one to a Skybus stop, Skybus to regional coaches to regional trains. So it's pretty powerful data set that will be shared with the open data community. This is also pretty important for customers with accessibility needs. So accessibility mapping will be done as part of this, and customers will be able to navigate to accessible routes within a station precinct. And pretty powerful, once again, when matched with the real-time arrival information of metropolitan trains. Another interesting aspect to this work as well is particularly around tourists. When our city opens back up, we'll be providing customers with that information when they might not be familiar with a station. So where has this led us? Because we're just starting to understand the power of open data within DOT. So we've been underway for the last couple of months around an open data transformation within DOT. We've been understanding the landscape internal to the department and the portfolio. We've been looking at what external opportunities there are for us with the open data developer community. We've been comparing ourselves to a range of other international jurisdictions, and we've been building out an operating model and a roadmap of initiatives for the department to implement. So I just wanted to take you through some of the high-level findings of our open data transformation work. Our open data landscape within DOT is quite complex, and this is a bit of a legacy of combining and integrating the former Vic Roads Public Transport Victoria with DOT. We actually have 5 sources of open data channels for transport data. We have the data.vic central portal out of DPC. We have the DOT Open Data Exchange or Open Data Platform, and then we have a range of other open data channels where our data customers get our information from. And you can also see underneath that a series of categories of transport data and where they are located across each of these platforms. So I guess in kind of the takeaway from this is it's not easy for data customers to find our data, and probably speaks to some of the points that Andrew had raised a little bit earlier on making this easy for people to do. We've also been underway with some international benchmarking against a range of leading jurisdictions across the world. And some of these findings are really kind of helping us shape the plan and approach for going forward. In particular, we're aligning a lot of this jurisdictional comparison to the state's open data policy positions and making sure that we've got a firm view of how we align and some of the improvements that we can make looking to learn from some of these leading jurisdictions. We've also been talking to the developer community. So a couple months ago now, we undertook a developer survey with organisations that use our transport data, companies that use transport data for decision making, citizen scientists, academic researchers, as well as a range of other entrepreneurs and industry researchers. And there's some pretty interesting findings that we've had from the developer survey, and I'll call out a couple for you because they're quite interesting. From the survey, 86% of respondents thought that transport's data was okay or worse, which is a pretty interesting finding for us. But also really interesting compared to some of the other survey questions in here around 72% of users thinking that we have moderate data quality expectations, and 45% are quite interested in the completeness of data. So I think kind of the story around this is that whilst our data at the moment probably needs some improvement, that releasing some data or more data is better than releasing no data. So the market is actually quite keen to have a lower quality data to be able to use rather than no data. Some of the other interesting kind of call outs in this survey are within the open data ecosystem engagement, and particularly around how others innovate with our data. And my kind of takeaway from a lot of this is a general vibe around the market wanting to help Victorians and customers, and particularly some of the interesting kind of call outs around 55% of users would consider paying for our data if it was value added. And we have a pretty high interest in 95% of the open data community wanting to collaborate with the broader ecosystem. And then we get it compared quite a lot in Victoria to New South Wales, fairly or unfairly. New South Wales has quite a mature approach within their transport open data space. And you can see those results there. So I've got one more slide to go. So I guess a lot of this work is kind of, where are we headed within transport, and particularly within our open data setting. And there's a couple of objectives that we're working through internally at the moment. We're pretty keen to ensure that open data is at the core of DOT's approach. We're very keen to be an enabler of data-driven innovation within our ecosystem. And we are super keen to also commence active engagement with open data users, making sure that we're leveraging and harnessing and building that community as much as we can. We're keen to become a trusted source of transport data, making sure that we are kind of making improvements to the quality, for example. Internally, we're making sure that we're embedding open data into our culture and our practices within DOT. And we're starting work around streamlining open data architecture. And the pretty telling example of this is the complexity in our open data channel access and the 5 current channels that are available. So I'll probably wrap up there, and I'm happy to take any questions now or at the end.
Thank you, Jason. Moving on, our last speaker and also a STEM female researcher, Dr. Macy Rakba, is a postdoc research fellow in emerging mobility at University of Queensland. She is a transport modeler with over 8 years of experience in the field of transport modeling and planning. Macy has been involved in a wide range of multidisciplinary projects for clients such as state governments, delivery authorities, and local councils. Her areas of interest and expertise are broadly in the area of strategic transport modeling and planning, public transport statistical modeling, large-scale transport data analysis and modeling, and also travel behavior modeling. Go, Macy, over to you.
Thank you very much. Let me. Okay. Can you see my screen? Yes, great. For this webinar, I decided to talk about my current project, which is a mobility as a service trial at UQ. You know that mobility as a service is a smart mobility solution with the main objectives reducing traffic congestion and air and noise pollution, and increasing safety, and also improving transfer speed between different modes of transportation. This project is a 2-year research program. The first year is for the trial itself. We started this trial since 28th July 2021. And the second year of this program would be all the data analysis, reporting, and publications. To run this trial, a separate company is set up to operate the trial, which is called Odin Pass. So the name of our mobile app is Odin Pass. You can go to App Store or Google Play Store to download the app and use the multimodal journey planner of this app. But in order to use the app and have an account on that, you need to be a UQ student or UQ staff. Any profits during this trial is reinvested into the program. And during the first 3 months of this trial, we had more than 1,700 purchase of bundles. This trial is funded by Department of Transport and Main Roads, UQ People and Facility, and iMove CRC. Also, it's good to mention that there is a high potential interest from Queensland Transport Minister, TMRDG, and Lord Mayor of Brisbane in this trial. We developed Odin Pass mobile app for both iOS and Android users, and each user can choose between different monthly passes, and each pass can include public transport, micromobility, taxi or ride share, and car sharing or car renting. Our public transport provider in Queensland is TransLink. If a pass includes public transport, it means that that user has access to unlimited public transport. And the same for micromobility, which is e-scooters and e-bikes. Our providers for micromobility are Neuron and Beam. At the moment, we don't have any service provider for rideshare, and we are in negotiation with some service providers, but we are working with 13 Cabs as our taxi provider, and we are working with GoGet as our car renting mobility provider. If the pass, as I said, include public transport or micromobility, the access would be unlimited. But for taxi and car renting, our approach is post-paid discount. And this is a 3 steps, a simple step of booking a public transport trip. You go on the app, you enter your origin and destination, and it shows some options and alternatives. Based on your profile. When you are setting up your profile, you choose which factor is the most important one in your journeys. For example, I here chose healthy options like walking, cycling. So the options that first came up for me was cycling or using shared micromobility devices. And for each option, you can see the estimated fee, number of calories that you will burn using that transport mode, and the emissions of that transport mode. And then you book your trip. You can click the show ticket bottom, and then the last image is my ticket. I showed this ticket to public transport drivers. This public transport mode can be train, tram, bus, and ferry. And so I showed this ticket to drivers or platform staff. Here at UQ Mass Trial, we are testing micromobility uptake by Odin Pass users as well. UQ support micromobility to reduce private vehicle trips to St. Lucia campus, because at the moment we have too many private vehicle trips from western suburbs of St. Lucia campus to our campus. So one of the objectives is reducing pollution and congestion, and also improving our UQ students and staff intra and inter-campus mobility. Also, Mass Trial presents an opportunity to test different interventions on campus related to micromobility devices. And Brisbane City Council and TMR are looking to UQ as a leader to showcase micromobility integration to see what are the factors influencing policy development across Brisbane and Queensland. But what is the role of data and open data in our Mass Trial? SketGo is developer of our mobile app. SketGo is using two types of data, open and closed. In terms of the open data, it's using general transit feed specification data for public transport static timetables, and also GTFS real-time for public transport real-time locations and arrivals, disruptions, alarms, and these sort of things. And also OpenStreetMap for road and footpath network, cycle, wheelchair, and accessibility information. It's interesting to see that GBFS is in closed data, because I think many of us think that GBFS should be open data. But in fact, when you are using with the active transport, or in this case, micromobility service providers, we need to request their feed. So this GBFS is in closed data category here. And also for getting access to Google vehicle locations and for integrating their API in our platform, again, we needed to submit our request, to do some paperwork on that, and that applied to mapping layers for Google and Apple Maps as well. But here, how open data facilitates our smart mobility, or mobility as a service here in our trial. Live running and timetable information allows multimodal journey planner here in our Odin Pass mobile app to be easily and quickly react to disruptions and show alternatives. So it's very important to mention the role of open data, which here one of them is GTFS real-time information. Here I prepared a map of using public transport by Odin Pass users for the first 3 months of our trial. You can see that here we have trips from Coolangatta in the south to Gympie in the north, and Ipswich in west, Cleveland and Wynnum in east. We have some tram trips here in the pink color. Trams here are only operating in Gold Coast. And we have ferry trips, maybe it's not very clear here, it's a green line here, operating in Brisbane River. Buses accounted for about 80% of the almost 44,000 public transport trips that were recorded during the first 3 months of our trial, and about 1 in every 5 trips using the app has 2 legs or more than 2 legs. Here in the research side that I'm working on, again, I use open data, and here I use GTFS because the data that I'm getting from ODIM Pass usage is has trip ID, origin and destination. So trip ID and route ID here is a key for me to connect each trip to GTFS data and to be able to visualize my data here. And here, another map for micromobility usage. At the beginning of the trial, maybe for the first week, we didn't have any data, if you noticed, because in that week, we went into COVID lockdown. So no one was using shared devices, which was a lesson to learn. Other than that, we can see that close to 3,000 trips were recorded using micromobility devices. And more than a quarter of all these micromobility trips have been used to get to or from public transport stations and stops. In that map, which was different to public transport map, we only had a smaller boundary and catchment area, and that's because of our mobility providers catchment area. You can see that this is the border, and St. Lucia campus is located here, and this is, sorry, St. Lucia campus is located here. This is the boundary, and this is the St. Lucia campus that we ask our micromobility providers to do some adjustments for us. For example, these areas are no ride zone. These are low speed. You can see it's 10 km per hour, no parking areas. And we designed some parking areas on the campus, and we ask our providers to make them geofenced. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Macy, and again to Jason and Andrew for this insightful presentations. And now we'll open the floor for panel discussions. Let's get rolling. I'll pick the questions first with those with a higher number of likes. And let's look at the first questions. I think I've got questions to probably all the panels, right? At what spatial granularity the open data of transport users is collected and released? Are these disaggregate data available for researchers? So do we want to go with maybe Andrew first, and then to Jason, and then lastly Macy?
Sure. So it's an excellent question, but unfortunately not an excellent answer, in that every jurisdiction is quite different in how they capture the data, the granularity of it, and then how that data is aggregated and provided, and the frequency, and then of course to who that's provided. So if you look at a lot of European countries, they've got very defined standards in the EU about the data that has to be provided under open mobility, for open data for mobility. But then as you start to move around the world, it becomes very varied. So it's not a jurisdictional outcome per se, but what I think is the best outcome for everyone is, instead of starting to provide granular detail about individual customers' trips, we provide information about customer flow and customer movement through the ecosystem, just to remove any ability for any reverse engineering or anything down to the individual. So more looking at flows and movements and behind influences on those flows rather than particular customers.
Right. Jason?
probably just adding to what Andrew has mentioned, there's not a perfect answer to the excellent question. It also depends on the data that you're looking at. And so an example around the crowding data with open data release will be, we'll only be releasing like 4 levels of busyness on the metropolitan train network as a level of granularity. And we're doing that because it aligns with the GTFSR standards. So the standards give a view for us in the level of granularity of the data that gets released. And I popped a link into the chat as well to Mobility Data, who are a not-for-profit based in Canada that look after transit data standards. It's a pretty good resource, and you can have a read of some of their material around GTFSR and some of the new standards that they're developing.
Yep. And Macy, your thoughts?
Yeah, and in addition to what Andrew said and also Jason, I would say that it's very important to collaborate with local authorities and to determine exactly what sort of data is necessary and for what purposes we need to use those data. And it can lead us to the level of aggregation of data, because we want to use that data if it's aggregated in a very higher level. So maybe what can be the use of that data, right? So I think the collaboration here means a lot.
Yep. So moving on to the next questions here. This is actually for Andrew. So when you monitor, track, or trace people's movement, how far the privacy becomes a concern?
Is this in places like Vegas and so forth? I assume so. Our solution, the NTT data solution, does not track individuals. Again, we actually remove the camera images right at the edge and convert it all into data. And again, start to consider not the individual, but the behaviors seen in that data. So instead of determining that a particular person is jumping a fence or doing something, we detect that the fence is being jumped, if that makes sense. So as to remove any possibility that we start to identify the individual. Now, there are circumstances where we do use that camera information. For example, we can detect a range of screams and gunshots and so forth in Las Vegas, and when that happens, we are able to turn those cameras on in those locations to support first responders. But I think it gets back to those regulations and ensuring that wherever possible, you start to remove identifying data as close to the edge as possible and just care about the patterns that data tells you.
Yep. So I've got another questions sort of along that line with higher lights as well. And I'll get Jason and Macy to answer that, right? What sort of framework, privacy, and security principles are defined by the government that are mandatory to be followed? So maybe I'll get Jason to go first and then Macy.
So we've got some pretty excellent legislative frameworks and policy frameworks here in Victoria, which kind of govern how we collect and share data. So there's a lot of necessary privacy, security obligations on the department, and we take those considerations pretty seriously, particularly around removing ability to identify personal data. So that's taken quite seriously. And then kind of in parallel to that, we do have a lot of commitment from government around sharing data with the open developer community so that they can innovate and create new services and products, and with researchers. So some of those include a recently released Victorian Government Innovation Statement, Digital Victoria strategy, which went live last week, and the department's DPC's open data policy position. You can find that on the web.
And Macy?
Yeah, I think Jason was the best person to answer that question because I'm not working for government, but here in Queensland government, I can see that before releasing the data, they have some security principles in place to anonymize the data before giving it like access to it to public.
Yeah. So I've got questions particularly for Macy. So
yeah.
this is again for higher likes. Any surprising results or outcome you have learned so far, especially when compared to the Sydney trial?
Yeah, very interesting question. Because before our trial, Sydney ran that trial for 4 months. And we cannot compare the scale of our trials because that trial was only for 80 people. But here we have around 2,000 people at the moment on our platform using our services. The other thing is in that trial, they didn't use micromobility, but we are using it here and it's giving us very interesting results. We haven't published any results yet, but seeing that a quarter of trips it's like people are using micromobility devices to get access to public transport stations. It's very interesting. And we had some meetings with TMR and Brisbane City Council because if that's what's happening, so we need to have micromobility hubs in our major public transport stations. What else? The other thing is that's very interesting as well. In Sydney trial, they used their smart ticketing. They loaded up with an amount of money and they gave those cards to users. But here we have this flash card. And when you want to run a big project, maybe you think that technology is the hardest part, but I would say it's not. It's the part that you need to deal with human beings. People got on the public transport modes and they showed their ticket. And unfortunately, some of the drivers were not aware of this project and they were questioning our users. So it happened at the very first, beginning of our trial, and we received some feedback from our users. And we noticed that this part is communication and getting all the parties involved informed about the project is very important. So that one was another finding out of this trial. But we are at the beginning of the trial. This trial is for 12 months. We just finished 4th month. So I hope that you all looking forward to receive some interesting results out of our trial.
So speaking of human public, so I've got a questions probably to all the invited speakers. What are some of the dangers of the use of open data generally? How concerned should the general public be, and how can these concerns be addressed? So I'll probably get Andrew to go first, and then Macy, and then Jason.
Okay. It is a genuine concern that we always need to think about, but I think it gets back to that founding principle of always ensuring that we are only collecting and using the data we need to deliver the outcome. I think there are a lot of standards now, and some have been mentioned today, that certainly help guide us towards making sure that we're only collecting that data. But I think it will vary from agency to agency, country to country, and the expectations as well. I would say that we're certainly seeing customer expectations move. As customers are expecting a more and more personalised service now, and then obviously to deliver that personalised service, the amount of data and type of data captured is changing. So I'd say expectations are changing somewhat, but that puts more onus on providers and agencies to ensure that that data is secure and used in the correct manner. And just as there are very exciting innovations and exciting new opportunities found with data once it's held and available, there can also be not exciting outcomes that can be considered once that data is held. So it's always a test. You've got to go back to that first principle of why did you collect the data? What's the data going to be used for? And is this new use meeting those needs?
Anything to add, Macy?
No, it was very comprehensive.
Okay, Jason?
I might just share, I guess, a bit of a kind of opposite concern maybe for DOT is, I think, so a couple of years ago, the former PTV was kind of involved in a bit of a data breach with some MICE information that went through to OVIX, Regulation and RMIT, so the Office of the Victorian Information Commissioner, and like the department's taken that incredibly seriously, but for the last kind of few years, the pendulum swung so heavy internally into the compliance space that we can't even share data internally, let alone with open data. So much of the work that I've presented on today is trying to find that middle ground, and so that more data is released and open and available, making sure that all of those kind of controls are in place.
Right. I've got another question, sort of it's sort of related to Victorian Australian regulatory. So maybe Andrew and Jason, you can take that. How does the existing Victorian or Australian regulatory framework compares to other jurisdictions in facilitating or hindering open data? How do you actually compare open data ecosystems with other jurisdictions? Are we ahead of other countries? So Andrew, you want to go first?
I was going to let Jason go for this one in the
Also,
regulatory
okay.
space, but
All right. So Jason, you happy to take it? Yeah.
Yeah, I think once again probably the answer is not going to be perfect as well, because we probably have a lot of disparity compared to the states in Australia as well in terms of regulatory settings. Each jurisdiction has its own requirements, and there's differing levels of kind of maturity in that. Like there's a lot of on an international level, there's a lot of maturity within the North American and European countries around open data, and a lot more, I guess, learning that's kind of occurred in how kind of services can be improved for customers with open data. So yeah, it's very different across the world. Within our kind of more local context, like I think maybe so. You know, New South Wales is a pretty leading jurisdiction in Australia, and there is a lot of movement kind of happening within Queensland and Victoria and New Zealand as well.
Yep. So
yeah.
I'll probably. And Andrew?
No, I was just going to agree, Jason. It's not a perfect answer, but all jurisdictions have their own outcomes for it, and yeah, the European Union has a very well-defined standard for open data, which is driving a lot of innovation in that space. North America is certainly having a look at it as well, but even within those, there is still room for change and so on. So I think it is an ongoing challenge of putting a regulatory framework in place that encourages open data and encourages outcomes while not stifling the innovation that you're trying to achieve with the innovation. So it's a constant balancing act for all jurisdictions, I think.
Right. I've got one question for Jason looking at the implementation, but I thought I'll get Macy to probably talk about any bottlenecks that you have sort of experience in terms of when you're trialing these systems in Queensland. And then afterwards, I'll get maybe Jason to answer that questions, the bottleneck you have identified in the implementation process of these initiatives. Yeah. So Macy will go first, and then Jason, and then lastly, I'll check with Andrew whether you have anything to add. Is that okay?
So is that in general in this trial or in using open data?
In
I
your
cannot see
trial.
the question. Yeah, okay.
The questions is probably asked very early on.
Yes, okay. So I answered that question, and I hope that I answered the last question at the same time, because the last question is how willing have ride-sharing companies been to share their data. So that one is one of the problem we are facing at the moment. These companies, well, they don't like to share the data, and our research program is all about the data. So that's what you are working on at the moment, to agree with one of them and get at least one of them on board. And so this is one of the obstacles here. And the other thing, I would say many of the mobility applications are designed in closed forms, and it's very hard to integrate them in our mobility service. And it's so we always need to go into official contracts to integrate their API, get access to the data. So I think this part is a bit like time consuming. And I would say if all this data in the standard form like was open, maybe we could save some time in this trial. Yeah.
And Jason?
The big bottleneck in the department that we've been trying to clear for the last 18 months has been to do with data standards. So making sure that our data is in the format that is agreed by industry. So that's much of our work that we've been doing in converting our internal Siri data formats into GTFSR so that they're easily understood and ingestible by apps.
Right. Any experience to share, Andrew, from entity data?
I'd say one of the challenges we see in this space is it is quite powerful for a bespoke provider to have data locked into a bespoke data structure that is very hard to move to another provider. And so that can often be a challenge for jurisdictions, is to move that data between these bespoke systems. So I'd say that desire to keep that status quo is somewhat of a bottleneck towards opening that data up to a more open data framework.
Thank you. I've got another question to Jason. So Jason, you are quite busy. You have, I think someone in the audience say you have mentioned that the open data were used for operational models. Do you mean meso or micro traffic simulation models or real-time traffic models? Please put some light on that.
So I was, I guess, referring a bit earlier on in my presentation to crowding data for the public transport network, and we've created essentially data models using a base level data set around Mikey touch-ons and enhancing it with some comparative or other data points like historical trends, major events, as well as weight sensor data that are on large parts of our train network. There is work underway in other parts of the department on roads data that will be kind of ready for open data consumption in the next few months.
Right. I think I'll probably still have space for the last questions, and I'll probably get all the panelists to answer that, and then we'll wrap up for this panel discussions. Yeah, the last questions from our professors in the department. Speaking of API, could the panelists comment about the API strategy maturity of public and private mobility organizations? So Macy, you want to go first, and then I'll get Andrew, and lastly Jason.
Yeah, that's a very good question. That's my concern as well. That why we don't have any. Well, maybe we have something in place that I'm not aware of that, but at least with dealing with some of our mobility providers, we had to go into different meetings in terms of convince them to get like integrating API in our platform. So yeah, I prefer to hear from Andrew and Jason based on their experience, and I would learn on this as well.
Right.
I think we're certainly seeing more and more transit providers, transport system providers exposing more and more APIs and leveraging APIs. I think there is still a place for some other data protocols in the ecosystem, but I think certainly in customer-facing touch points, the APIs are becoming more and more prevalent. Probably in the B2B segment of the ecosystem, there's still quite a lot of legacy systems that have legacy ways of providing that data. But I think the use of APIs is growing, but maybe more in the B2C category than the B2B category.
Yep. And Jason?
There's a lot of work going on internally to DOT around creating APIs, but DOT is probably not alone in this in government, and so there's some initiatives that are kind of being run centrally out of Department and Premier and Cabinet around an API marketplace for government agencies. So I'll pop a link into the chat because it's a really good way to, I guess, feed into what is a pilot process for Victorian government, which is really aimed at kind of connecting organisations with developers and startups and scale-ups.
Yep. Well, thank you everyone for your questions. I'm very conscious of the time. Unfortunately, we have to end the panel discussions at this point of time. I think I've seen some questions from Craig saying that they would like to contact Jason. I think, Craig, you can actually connect with Jason through LinkedIn and you can ask him about your questions. Yeah. And let's move on. We have another co-host, Institute of Transportation's Engineer, ITE, and I would like to hand it over to Sarah, the president. If Sarah is here, if not, then I'll get, I think I can see David. If not, I'll get the Secretary of ITE, David, to give a few words. And then David will pass it directly to Victor, the leader of Global Transport and Logistics Research Group, to close the webinar.
Thank you very much, Yiling. So the ITE is very pleased to be able to co-host this session and the other sessions in this series. We hope that that has expanded the audience of this important topic, and it's great to be able to do that. ITE is a large organisation across the world and operates in about 75 countries. It's fairly small within Australia and New Zealand, but we try to run webinars and enhance the information exchange across Australia and New Zealand. So I'd like to thank very much Andrew, Macy and Jason for their work, their presentations, and also to the backroom people at RMIT who've helped to organise this session. I've learnt a lot. I've learnt what GTFS means, and I've also learnt that there are just as many acronyms in the open data world as there are in the transport world. So thank you very much for your contributions, and I'll hand over now.
Yiling, do you want to load the slide? You're muted, Yiling.
Okay. I'm sharing the screen now. Can you guys see that?
Yes. Go to the previous slide, please, Yiling.
Okay.
Oh, I think there's a slide missing there. Go to the next one, please. Okay. Look, I want to thank everybody most sincerely, and I want to echo the words of Dean David Smith at the beginning of the session. and to say thank you to all our panelists, Andrew, Jason, Macy, and David, for your great contribution to our session. I also want to say, to add on to what David said at the beginning, that we've had a series of very successful and I think very informative webinars this year, 2021. We've had tremendous support from industry, from various organizations. We've had tremendous support from our participants, the public who've joined us from Australia, from overseas, industry, academia. We are very grateful. As I've said before in such forums, it is this kind of support that enables us to develop our research and to be able to disseminate it in a way that creates impact to the community and to industry as we aim to achieve to do. In a sense, as the director of the Global Transport and Logistics Research Group, I am every time reminded that I sit in a very happy position. You see, I get to come in at the end and take the credit for all the good work of all the members of the group. And I must say that I lead a group of very committed, very experienced, and very knowledgeable colleagues across different themes. And the theme that we've been exploring today and in previous two sessions or webinars is the smart mobility theme. And I'd like to extend my gratitude to Professor Alan Moller, who has led that team or that theme through these exciting activities and encouraging all of us and leading us through organizing this. But we've got other themes as well that have done equally well. The transport analytics theme, the gender matters in transport work, connectivity and global transport networks, and technology and future of work theme. So what is it that we expect from here on? We will continue the good work that we've started. We'll continue to rally you as our participants and our industry partners to bring to you again another series of great events next year. The list and the schedule is going to be released sometime later. But I would encourage you to please keep working with us and keep supporting us. And I'm sure that we'll grow this this group and as well as these themes significantly over the next few years. So thank you very much, and thank you for taking your time. Thank you for your support. And I look forward to seeing you again. Looking at the list, I realize that most of you are actually return participants, which is really, really good. It's encouraging to us. If you'd like to ask any questions or reach out to us in any particular way, please drop me an email. But also I've included the link of the Global Transport and Logistics Research Group at the bottom of that slide, which I think we are going to share out to the participants. Please visit us, watch this space, and join us again as we bring to you more events in the coming year. Thank you very much and keep safe.
All right, thank you everyone for your participations. And then that marks the end of this webinar of, I think, 2021. And look forward to seeing you again in 2022.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you.
See you, Yiling. Bye-bye.
Very good. Thank you. It's good. It was very good. Thank you.